Здравствуйте. Здравствуйте. Меня зовут Инна Стивенс. Я консультант по образованию компании Promission. Компания Promission выпускает интерактивные технологии для класса. Прежде всего, это такие интерактивные дисплеи, которые используют учителя в своей работе. И сегодня я рада представить спикера доктора Джона Коллика. Доктор Джон Коллик – глава отдела стратегии образования в нашей компании Promission. Я немного расскажу о докторе Джоне. Прежде всего, хочу сказать, что до того, как он работал в Promission, он работал в Японии в университете, 10 лет преподавал английский язык, английскую литературу, и он автор книги о Шекспире. А также, работая в этом университете, это университет Васеда в Токио, он был одним из создателей первой системы электронного обучения в этом университете. Сейчас Джон работает с министерствами в разных странах мира и разрабатывает и производит инновационные решения для образования вместе с министерствами. Примером из недавних примеров, например, сейчас мы реализуем проект в Египте, где более 26 тысяч классов уже оборудовано нашими интерактивными панелями, и там идет обучение педагогов, вот эти программы, вот эту работу по переподготовке преподавателей, все это возглавляет отдел стратегии образования во главе с Джоном Колликом. Джон Коллик также автор книг о он автор нескольких научно-фантастических романов. В сфере его профессиональных интересов это прежде всего индивидуальные стратегии обучения, нейронауки, новые технологии в образовании. И хотелось бы мне сказать, я очень рада, что я уже 11 лет работаю вместе с доктором Джоном, и я надеюсь, что вы будете рады тоже с ним познакомиться и увидеть его взгляд на глобальные проблемы в образовании и то, как меняется сегодня образование. Видео, пожалуйста.
Hello, my name's Dr. John Collick. I'm Head of International Education Strategy for Promethean. Part of my job involves working closely with ministries of education all over the world to develop strategies and projects to help them implement technology into education so that they can achieve what they're trying to achieve in terms of teaching and learning outcomes. Over the next 20 minutes, I want to talk a little bit about global education strategy for a sustainable world. I think that what's happened over the last 6 months, and particularly over the last 3 months, is that we've become more aware of what we need to focus on in terms of education in order to meet the challenges and risks that we are now facing, both nationally and internationally. So the theme of this talk is global education for a sustainable world. So what do we mean by global education for a sustainable world? I think we need to start by looking at some of the risks that we are now facing and how they impact on our ideas about teaching and learning. This is a risk interconnection map that was created by the World Economic Forum at the end of last year. And it shows all of the risks that face humanity and that are likely to have an impact on the global economy and on society. At the time that this map was created, which I think was around about November or December 2019, the most important or the biggest threat that the World Economic Forum focused on was the danger of climate change. What they didn't actually realise, was that in fact the biggest risk and the risk that we are now facing came from the spread of infectious diseases. Because we've now seen the rise of a coronavirus pandemic, which is having a huge effect on society in general, causing a lot of suffering, but also has had a massive impact on education. I think that with the risk interconnection map in general, and when we think about education in global terms, in sustainable terms, then it kind of becomes clear as to where we need to focus our outcomes. In the past, we've tended to follow a narrative that goes something like this. The purpose of modern education is to develop 21st century skills for our students, to allow them to do jobs. But the problem is we don't know what the jobs are yet, because these are future jobs. They're likely to be highly technical, technologically focused, multimedia, internet focused. So we have to train our students in order to develop the resources and the competencies that they need in order to do these not yet created jobs. I think that in the light of what's happened, I think in the light of the risk interconnection map, and I think in the light of the rise of the issues that we now face with COVID-19, we know exactly what jobs we need to train people for the future. To give a perfect example, the World Health Organization estimates that the world needs another 9 million nurses and midwives by 2030. I think that's low. I think that number is too low, personally. I would suggest, particularly in the light of what's happened now, it's way too low. But we need nurses. We need nurses and we need doctors. We need lab technicians. We need disease control experts, etc. We also need teachers. We're desperately short of teachers. UNESCO estimates that the world needs almost another 70 million teachers over the next 10 years or so. We need more farmers. We need people to grow our food. We need a transport network. We need distribution centres. We need people to work in jobs that provide the basic infrastructure for our societies. And we have seen in England, in Europe, in America and elsewhere, that the most important jobs in society are the jobs that have always been there. Doctors, nurses, farmers, food distribution workers, all those jobs. That's what we need to train people for. We don't need more programmers. We've got enough programmers, but we do need more farmers. We do need more nurses. We do need more engineers and technicians. So what we're talking about is that the focus for education, global education on a sustainable level, needs to be essentially concentrated on vocational education. Also, if we're talking about global education for a sustainable world society, then there's already been some preparatory work that's been done by the United Nations with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are the Sustainable Development Goals for the year 2030. Number 4 is quality education. That's a fundamental global sustainable goal. But what do we mean by quality education? What are the components of a quality education? Well, based on my experience, based on the research I've done, based on the conversations that I've had with ministers, with teachers, with students, with industry leaders working in this field, I've kind of broken down what I feel are the essential components of a quality education in terms of education technology. So here we are. These are what I feel to be the education goals, the components of a sustainable quality education goal from the point of view of technology. First of all, equality of access. Giving access to every child on the planet, giving them access to quality education enhanced by technology. And I will talk a little bit more about that in a short while. Secondly, improvement of standards of education. So we need to improve the standards, the learning outcomes, the quality of teaching in the classroom. Access to quality content, access to quality content that is mapped to the national curriculum. Effective assessment. We need to develop effective assessment strategies And certainly on a global level, we need to look at how we can standardize our assessment strategies so that, for example, if I train an architect in one country and give them a qualification, they can then go with that qualification to any country in the world and show their certificate and design and build a house. Properly trained and resourced teachers, this is quite an urgent, quite a pressing issue in many countries throughout the world. We have a shortage of trained teachers. We have a shortage of teacher support, adequate support in terms of professional development. So we need to put in place procedures to provide teachers with the support, the competencies and the professional backing that they need to become effective practitioners. We need safe classrooms. We need safe classrooms not only in terms of classrooms free from bullying, but also we need classrooms that are hygienic. We need classrooms that give children access to sanitation facilities. One of the biggest reasons why girls don't go to school is because of a lot of schools simply do not have segregated toilets for girls. So we need adequate sanitation facilities, we need water, we need electricity, we need power. We need these classrooms to be safe, hygienic and provide a quality environment for teaching and learning. And finally, we need to enhance learning through technology. Not in a way whereby technology takes over the process, but we need to have technology enhanced learning. And this is something that comes back again to access, because at the moment we do have a situation where education technology tends to be concentrated in the privileged parts of the world. It tends to be concentrated in those countries with a strong economy, with a strong infrastructure, with broadband, with internet, with the money to invest in high technology within schools. And elsewhere, we have cases where students don't even have a school to go to. And this is a massive imbalance. Now, there is a tendency to say, okay, in those places where we don't have access to education, let's start by building a basic classroom. Let's build a basic school with desks and chairs and a blackboard. And then later on, if we have some extra funds, then we'll give them computers. I think that's fundamentally the wrong way to do it, because all you are doing is you are perpetuating the imbalance between the privileged few and everybody else. So I think it's absolutely essential that when we develop an infrastructure that provides access and capacity for all children, irrespective of their social and economic background, then we make sure that from the very beginning, every child has access to a technology-enabled learning environment. So I think that is very important when we talk about access. So in the next section, I'm going to talk a little bit about what has happened in response to the coronavirus pandemic in education and the implementation and development of distance learning strategies on a large scale. In this section, I want to talk about distance learning. Over the past few months, we've seen the unfortunate outbreak of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, as a result of which many schools have closed. Unfortunately, teachers and students are having to self-isolate, and it looks like this is going to be the case for certainly many months, even perhaps at least to the end of this academic year. Distance learning is very interesting. We've seen globally the implementation of distance learning strategies very rapidly, and there are some good points and there are some bad points about distance learning, both in terms of the short term, but also long-term as well. I want to talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of distance learning, what's good, what's bad, but also the overall influence it's going to have on education once we've passed this crisis and once we get back to normal. What are the long-term effects that it's going to have? So let's look at the good points and the bad points about distance learning. To begin with, distance learning tends to make education more student-centred. Normally a child will go to school, they'll go to classes, so they'll go to several classes in one day, and so they will have more or less constant teacher contact time. That's not practical with distance learning for a whole range of reasons. And so contact time and work assignment tends to be more spaced apart. What this does is that it makes education more student-centred. It puts the onus, it puts the initiative back onto the student. So the student has to check in, they have to get their homework, they have to get the tasks that they've been set. They then have to do the work by themselves at home, and then they have to submit the work. This is the standard distance learning model. So it tends to be more student-centred. It tends to increase the potential within students for self-management, self-motivation, and self-awareness. It also works best with project-based learning rather than knowledge transmission, for the simple reason that it is, from an organisation point of view, much easier to give a student a complex piece of work, tell them to go away and do the work and then report back, rather than feed constant standardised knowledge transfer or teaching in the same way that would happen in a classroom. So the positive side of distance learning is that it's a very effective way of ensuring that a student develops the competencies to manage their own learning and to do their own learning. The negative side, well, the biggest negative side is that really it's a lonely, isolated, solitary activity. People tend to forget that education is as much about socialisation as it is about learning things. Children go to school not only to acquire knowledge and skills, but they also go to school in order to develop the ability to socialise with other humans. And education is a social activity. And we are fundamentally social animals. We thrive when we are in a group with other people. We learn better, we understand better when we are working with other people in close proximity. So there is one of the biggest issues with distance learning is that this socialisation part of education has been removed. The second problem, and this is again an administrative problem, is that it massively increases the workload for teachers, and this is becoming very apparent in the current crisis. I'm seeing a lot of articles by teachers from Italy, from the Middle East, saying that distance learning has increased my workload to an unsustainable level. It's so much more work. I simply can't do it. I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, and I don't have the physical space to do this to the level that I would do classroom teaching. So it increases the workload, and also it causes fatigue. After the initial excitement has passed, after the initial feeling that great, I can learn from home, I don't have to go to school, then tiredness and boredom will very quickly set in. And I think this is already happening, and I think that by the time we get to the end of this situation, a lot of people are going to react against distance learning and be desperate to get back into school. The students will want to go back to school to be with their friends, and distance learning will not have the appeal that it has at the moment, because among students, because of its novelty. But again, to go back into the long-term effect and impact of distance learning, as I said before, because it tends to place emphasis upon the student and the student's initiative and self-management capabilities, and it also focuses upon project-based learning, then I think overall, because we are now implementing it on such a large scale, that it's pushing education more towards project-based learning, project-based assessment, and constructivist ways of teaching and learning instead of the old standardized knowledge transfer, because that's the kind of learning and teaching that distance learning encourages. So I think it will promote and accelerate a trend towards student-centered learning at a global level. It also throws up an interesting question in terms of assessment, because it's not easy to do test projects work through simple quizzes and tests. You have to develop a more complex competence-based method of assessment. So you're not just testing knowledge. If a child is self-managing, they're doing project work, they're reporting on a complex project, they're doing constructivist learning, then they are developing skills that are much more complex. They're developing competencies that need a more complicated and more developed and a more sophisticated method of assessment. So we need to develop assessment strategies that will assess complex competencies. And by a happy coincidence, vocational education, because vocational education, like nursing and professional education, like training to be a doctor, and engineering, and all of the vocational jobs that I mentioned earlier, these are all about the development and developing of complex skills and competencies. And so assessment, we need to develop methods of assessment to do this. So finally, I think that distance learning will increase our tendency towards creating students who are self-aware, self-directed learners. And that in the long term, I think, is a good thing. I think that the current situation, the current unfortunate coronavirus pandemic, has emphasized what we were beginning to understand based on the World Economic Forum's risk map, that we know where our focus needs to be in terms of education. We know what the jobs of the future are. We need nurses, we need doctors, we need farmers, we need engineers. We need to train more people to be certified experts in maintaining the systems and the processes and the infrastructure whereby our civilization exists, survives, and will thrive and grow. So I think that we need to move more towards vocational education. We need to re-emphasize the importance of vocational education. Secondly, I think our best guide for global education strategy is the United Nations Sustainable Goal number 4, quality education. And if we break that down in terms of education technology, then, as I said before, these, I think, from an education technology point of view, are the things that we need to focus on as our immediate goals. Equality of access, and this is perhaps the most important. Access for all students to a quality learning environment that is technologically enhanced. Improvement in standards, access to quality content, effective assessment, properly trained and resourced teachers. We must focus on developing and enhancing teacher capacity. Safe classrooms, safe from bullying, hygienic, with sanitation facilities and equipped with the latest technology. And we need to enhance education through technology for all students. And finally, I think that what we've seen with the impact of coronavirus and the sudden implementation of distance learning systems throughout the world is that we will see a move, a push now towards a more student-centred, project-based, constructivist approach to education, in which the student, using some of the things we've learnt from neuroscience, the students become self-aware, self-reflective, active agents of their own learning. So, thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope it's been useful. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments. I'd be very interested to hear from you all. And please enjoy the rest of this virtual conference. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо, доктор Джон, за представление вашего видения будущего глобальных целей образования и профессионального образования. Thanks a lot, John, for presenting your vision on global education goals and professional education. Хотелось бы прежде всего спросить, вот в презентации прозвучало, что некоторые приемы нейронауки могут использоваться в образовании. Как развитие нейронауки повлияет на то, как мы учимся сегодня и завтра? The question is how the development of neuroscience will affect how we learn today and tomorrow.
Neuroscience is a very new, modern neuroscience is a very new discipline.
Современная нейронаука очень новая дисциплина. I'll do
But
translation.
we are learning some very exciting new things, particularly in the way that the brain learns and remembers.
И мы узнаем сейчас все же некоторые совсем новые вещи о том, как мозг учится и как запоминает.
One of the most powerful mechanisms that we are discovering through neuroscience is the idea of self-awareness and self-cognition.
Одна из самых мощных идей в нейронауке – это то, как мы теперь понимаем самоосознание и самопонимание.
So by being aware of how the mind works, how we actually do learn, it gives us the ability to control our learning to a much greater extent.
Понимая то, осознав, как мозг учится, это дает нам большой контроль над учебным процессом, над своим собственным учебным процессом.
So it's very powerful. We have to be careful because it's new. So we need to make sure that the science is correctly tested and verified.
Это очень мощно, но нам надо быть очень внимательными, потому что это все совсем новое, и наука еще только исследует способы, как мы можем учиться и понимать.
But I think it will have a massive influence.
Но думаю, что это будет иметь огромное влияние. And Dr. John, I have one more question. Еще один вопрос доктору Джону. Вот если мы сказали, нейронаука будет иметь мощное влияние, может быть, какие-то конкретные примеры, то, что мы видим уже сегодня как прием, который можно использовать. Maybe there are some techniques or methods which we can use even today, neuroscience, to be more self-awareness learners.
Yes, I agree. I think emotional intelligence is very important.
Я согласен, и прежде всего это то, что очень важна эмоциональная интеллектуальность.
Basically, emotion has a huge impact on cognition.
Эмоции влияют очень сильно на понимание и познание.
So by teaching students to understand and manage their emotions,
когда мы учим наших учеников понимать и управлять своими эмоциями,
we'll give them very powerful tools to improve their ability to learn.
тем самым даем им очень моменты с тем, чтобы они могли управлять своим обучением.
Another thing we've discovered is that failure actually improves understanding.
И другое, то, что мы сейчас недавно осознали, это то, что провал, ошибка, она способствует пониманию.
So it's very important to encourage students to accept failure, but then reflect upon it.
Очень важно для учащихся принимать свои ошибки и понимать их.
And that it does improve, that massively improves understanding and learning.
И вот это принятие ошибки, это очень сильно тоже продвигает в обучении. Dr. John, let's talk a little bit about professional education trends you mentioned in your presentation. Давайте вернемся, может быть, к вопросу профессионального образования, которое затронул доктор Джон, и прозвучало много, что востребованы, какие профессии востребованы сегодня. Неужели и правда нам не надо больше изобретать вот этих новых профессий, а мы должны стараться заполнить и учить представителей уже знакомых нас профессий, настолько востребованных сегодня, как медсестры? Do you really think that we don't need to think anymore about the future, and the main aim is to fulfill our job vacancies for the jobs which are on demand today on the job market, and first of all, like, let's say, nurses?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think ultimately the purpose of education is the betterment of the human species. The ultimate goal is for us to grow as a species.
Основная цель, самая наша главная цель в образовании нас – это улучшать нас как человечество, как вид, существующий на планете.
But at the moment, we have a huge imbalance in the world between the countries who have a well-developed infrastructure and society, and most of the countries that don't.
И сегодня у нас просто огромный дисбаланс между странами, которые имеют развитую инфраструктуру и развитое общество, и тем, которые не имеют этого.
The problems we will face in the future are global.
Проблемы, которые мы столкнемся в будущем, они глобальные.
So it is our priority as a species to make sure that globally we have all the experts we need to solve those problems.
И глобально мы должны быть уверены в том, что у нас будут эксперты в глобальном масштабе, чтобы решить все эти вопросы. Большое спасибо.
That's why the priority right now is nurses and doctors and farmers.
И поэтому сегодня приоритет – это медсестры, врачи и слесари. Большое спасибо, доктор Джон. Я думаю, что было интересно узнать ваше мнение многим участникам ММСО. Большое спасибо всем, кто смотрел презентацию. Пожалуйста, вы можете связаться с нами на стенде «Промиссия» на ММСО. Спасибо.
Thank you very much.